The talk that I'm going to give tonight is a talk that I have been dreading giving for the last 2 years or so. My mom got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in December of 2018. Is that 2 years ago? And when my mom got diagnosed, it's because she went into the hospital because she was already getting symptoms. It turned out that she had a tumor that was growing in her liver. It was the size of a golf ball, and it was already blocking off the flow of stuff in her body. And so when pancreatic cancer is already spread to other areas in your body, it is the closest thing to a death sentence as there is, and it is a very, very quick spreading deadly disease. So most people only survive about 6 months after the cancer is spread to another organ. And my mom lasted 2 years. And that is one of many things that I want to talk about tonight. But my mom passed away fairly peacefully last week, and I got a call from my dad, and things had gone from what seemed pretty manageable, like she seemed like she was doing okay, and took a quick dive down. So my dad called me and my brother. We ran up, and they already had her on life support, and my mom did not want to be on life support. So as soon as we got there, we held her hand, we said goodbye, and we were with her there while she passed away. I have a lot of feelings about that experience of actually being there with my mom when she passed, some good, some bad. And in my original conception of this talk, it was going to be all about like loss and how to deal with this. I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but I changed my mind and I want to talk about fun stuff with my mom mostly, because that's who my mom was. My mom was not the kind of person that you would talk about like in a drab, depressing way, because she was never either of those things. But I will start by talking a little bit about that stuff, as I have already been. At my mom's funeral, my uncle said, my uncle Paul is a great uncle. I love him, and he's become infamous for overly long emotional speeches that don't go anywhere after his daughter's wedding. So when he started speaking, we were all kind of like holding our breath. But he really nailed it in a poignant and wonderful way. He said that the thing that he was struck by being at my mom's funeral more than anything else was the silence. Because my mom was loud. My mom was loud in all the best ways and also a few annoying ways. But she was like, you knew when she was there. And she was the life of every party. And she was the reason that we had parties. She invited everybody over to the house, and she would feed everybody, and she would, everybody would drink, and everybody would laugh and dance, and my mom was always dancing, and my mom was always, talking to everybody, and you knew that she was there. No matter where you were in the vicinity, you knew that my mom was there. And that was what struck my uncle. And when he said that, it struck me really, really hard, because the silence of my mom not being there was just deafening. And actually, over the last couple of weeks, when I was up at my mom's house, my parents' house in the Bay Area, I kept expecting her to walk in, and I kept expecting to hear her voice, to be correcting my grammar or something. I've got a very good sense of correct grammar because of my mom and because of Catholic school. My mom used to stop me every time, and anybody else, not just me, not just my brother, but anybody who said hopefully, because hopefully is always used incorrectly. According to my mom, and if you look it up in actuality, people always say like, well, hopefully this gets done, or hopefully that. That's not how you use it. It's an adverb. It describes a verb, and it's like, it should be, I did this hopefully. And my mom would point that out to us every time. And I'm the only person I know who uses the word hopefully correctly. That's all an aside. My mom was always loud, and there was an energy and a presence about her that has really just been a hole. Of course, there's a hole in my heart, but there is a real hole in like the auditory nature of the world for me right now. And it's a very strange kind of visceral reminder. Every time I leave class over the last few months, I would call my mom, and I'd be, walking home, call my mom and talk to her. And now I go to pull my phone out, and I'm not going to call my mom. So it's weird. There is the last thing that I'll try to say about this kind of more depressing part of it is this idea of loss during the pandemic. And I think that almost all of us have lost somebody close to us, or we know somebody at least kind of close to us that has died. My mom did not die from COVID. In fact, my mom got COVID and beat it with pancreatic cancer. She like had fevers for a week and was just like, nope, not yet, and just survived. But we have family, friends, and people who are close to us who died from COVID, and it is an especially difficult thing to deal with when we cannot grieve in the way that we are used to grieving, in the way that we want to grieve. And I am kind of embarrassed to say that we had a funeral with a ton of people there for my mom. We were all 6 feet or more away from each other, outside wearing masks, and still there were too many people there for my liking. But we found a way to do it in a way that I think my mom would have been very happy to see, especially since my mom beat COVID and wasn't really being that careful about it anymore. But we had like 60 people show up. And people flew in from all over the country, friends from Michigan, friends from some of my friends from high school, and some of my Kung Fu friends flew to be there for the funeral. And it was really a testament of who my mom was, to be able to draw such a crowd during a pandemic when it's totally insane for people to be traveling. And I'm going to knock on wood, but we have been checking with people, and nobody has shown any symptoms or is testing for COVID. So testing positive for COVID. So that's good. I think we were as careful as we could be without just not doing it. I want to talk about the stuff that I learned from my mom. So this talk is really, the topic is what I learned from my mom. And there are a lot of great things. The thing that I was talking about earlier about her being loud and energetic and being bold, my mom was one of the only people in my life before I met Sifu Brown who had this kind of energy that you guys see me put forth in class. This is not a thing that I was born with. This is a thing that my mom and my Sifu pounded into me and drew out of me. And there's room in this world for all kinds of people. And we need introverts, and we need extroverts, and we need people who are leaders, we need people who are thinkers, and people who are going to solve problems and do that without needing to get any of the external gratification. My mom was a leader. She was always in charge. And I learned, part of my ability to do that through my mom. My mom was a city manager for, I want to say 20, 25 years in 5 different cities in California and in Michigan. And she was always in charge. She had a staff, and everybody, would always, ask her what they were supposed to be doing, and she would tell them. And I don't know, my mom didn't have any like formal training to be a city manager. She just like was good at telling people what to do. She practiced on me all the time. And my brother, she would tell us, this is how you clean a bathroom. This is another thing that I learned from my mom, how to clean a bathroom correctly. The first time, it took me 20 years to do it, but my mom just recently stopped correcting me on how to clean a bathroom. That's another thing that I learned from both my mom and from martial arts, because in martial arts, we take care in the way that we clean, in the way that we do everything. We call it soji, where it's like a spiritual activity at the end of class. We purify the area that we practice in. Well, before martial arts, there was none of that. It was just my mom like taking me back through and like, Ryan, do you see this spot right here? Did you clean this? Did you clean this mirror? And she was never like angry or overly annoyed by it. It was just like, this is just not the way that it's done. When you clean something, you clean it properly, you clean it completely. And so she taught me the technique, and then martial arts taught me the spiritual side of it. One of the things that my mom taught me a little bit later on, the first time that I got, my mom taught me to fight, not physically, but how to fight for what is important. And my mom tried to give me this lesson early on. It was a little bit misguided, but when I was a kid, some of you guys have heard me talk about this, I was made fun of incessantly. I was just like that kid that just never fought back, and people like took advantage of my kind of wimpy nature, and they made fun of me. And when you are in a small class in a private school, there are only like 1 or 2 kids that are getting the brunt of it, and I was that kid. And so I felt like terrible all the time. I thought that I was the only kid that anybody ever made fun of in the world. My mom's solution to this when I was a child was to give me insults that I could say back to these people, because my mom didn't know what to do. She was she was the kind of person that if somebody said something to her, she'd be like, oh, that's what you think. Well, let me tell you what I think. I was not like that. I was like, that's what you think? Okay. And my mom just didn't really know like how to get me to get some of that. So she was basically told me, well, this is what I would say. And she would just feed me insults like, okay, well, next time he says this, go back and say this. And the one that sticks in my head, because it's such a ridiculously lame insult from the era that my mom grew up in, was to tell this kid that he was uglier than the bottom of my shoe. And I just thought that's like such a hilarious grandma thing to say. I never used it. I hope that she's happy that I'm telling people about it now. But my mom, her instinct was to fight. My mom was, if you were on her side, she was a strong fighter. If you were on the other side, she was stubborn. And my mom could be very stubborn. My mom and my dad were married for 45 years, and that takes a certain amount of stubbornness, and that takes a certain amount of fight to get through that. But there are some interesting and fun stories about my mom fighting. The first time that I really had her in my mind as somebody who was a great example of standing up for what you believe in was early days of like the Catholic Church, scandals with priests being moved around after, sexually assaulting kids, and it was like not being handled well by the church. And the and my mom went to a town hall meeting type thing at the church. And this is the church that we attended every Sunday. And the priest at that time was up there kind of trying to explain away and stand up for the way that the Catholic Church was handling this. And my mom, in this meeting of, I don't know, hundreds of people, stood up and she told off the priest and she said, "This is wrong." And she walked out and we never went back to that church. And it was, you know, I'm not going to say that that's necessarily the way that I would handle it, but it was a way to handle it that was kind of fearless, to be able to stand up amidst all of this disagreement, essentially. She knows she's standing up and she's going to be in the minority of people who are willing to say this, at least. And to stand up for what she knows is right. And I remember that, even though I wasn't there, I have a very clear mental image of my mom doing that, literally standing up and saying something that was not going to make her popular because it was what she believed. My mom had a run-in with an almost equally powerful opponent as the Catholic Church. When my mom was city manager, she had a run-in with Donald Trump. Donald Trump before he was president. This is a story that will live on for infamy. And if you guys ever watched the Colbert Report, there was actually an episode that was dedicated to this fight, although it didn't mention my mom by name. But years ago, this was like 2007, I want to say, the Trump golf course down in Rancho Palos Verdes, which is the city that my mom was the city manager of, they put up this gigantic flagpole and a gigantic American flag. And it was in fact so big that it was going against the rules of the city. It was not to code, and it was blocking people's views of the ocean. In addition to this, the golf course didn't like some of the shabby looking homes that were along the golf course. So they were building, or you don't build trees, they were planting trees or like high shrubs that were very dense and were blocking the view of the house from the golf course and also blocking the view of the ocean from the houses. And you were not allowed to do this according to the city. But this did not stop Donald Trump from sending several threatening letters and calling my mom repeatedly to talk to her about this. And my mom wasn't budging, so he took her to lunch with a small group of people and obviously had this idea that I'm going to be able to schmooze my way through this. And whatever your feelings about Trump are, I've let enough of my meditation talks get political up to this point. I'll just say that you kind of know how this was going, right? You can visualize how this meeting was going. And my mom just sat there and was polite and just like nodded and then at the end said, "Well, we're not going to do that, but thank you for lunch." And, you know, Trump was sending letters threatening to get all of the city council members, unelected. What you like prop up somebody else to run against them so that they're not going to have a job and all this stuff. And my mom was just not having it. So that was a fun thing for me to remember as well, as I always will. There are lots of opportunities, I think, in the world today for us to feel oppressed by the powers that be. And there are a lot of injustices going on in the world that demand our attention and demand our action. And many of those things are not going to have agreement from lots of other people. Many of the things that we might need to stand up for are the actual minorities in our society, the people who are not protected properly by our laws and our political system and just by other people in their lives. So those are the people that need us to stand up for them, and to stand up to power is an important thing. This is something that my mom taught me. She also taught me what I will call efficiency. My mom was a very frugal woman, thrifty, cheap. My mom, and it's funny because she was efficient with her money. My mom, you know, my parents made plenty of money, and they had way more than they needed. But my mom, if you were to ever walk into her kitchen and open up the refrigerator or open up the pantry, you would see a very impressive collection of outdated condiments, things that had gone not quite bad, you know, things like ketchup that are like, you can let it slide for a couple of years. As long as it's been in the fridge, it's probably still okay. And every once in a while, we'd try to use something and it would come out like a different form of matter than it was supposed to be. It would be like a gaseous form or a liquid form when it was supposed to be solid. And it was like, my mom was just like, I don't need to buy more of that. I've got it at home already. What am I going to do with new ketchup? Who needs that? But my mom would spend money on things that were important to her and things that would kind of, you know, grow. So my parents were really great at buying a house for us to live in that would appreciate and value, and she wouldn't skimp on things that she knew would you know, end up, you know, ketchup doesn't make you money, but real estate in California does. And this efficiency is something that I would love to say that I am as efficient and good with money as my mom was, but that would be just a bald-faced lie. But I can say that when I go to buy something, I think about my mom, and I wonder if she would buy it or if she would give me like a dirty look in the situation. Sometimes that stops me from buying whatever it is that I'm about to buy. Efficiency in, you know, our energy and efficiency in our resources and all of that. This is a huge important lesson in martial arts, right? We don't use lots of extra superfluous movements in our art. This is a, you know, while it can be a kind of a flowery, very flowy form, it is a very efficient form, and it teaches us how to move with efficiency. And we want to not only be efficient and frugal and thrifty with our movements and our energy expenditure in class and in our physical movements, but we want to be that way with everything in life. And so that's just one example from my mom that we can all take. My mom taught me how to have fun. My mom made everything fun. We used to drive. We had what in LA terms is a very short commute, but when we were kids, it seemed like forever. We lived way up on a mountain, and we had to go down Highway 17 through the Santa Cruz Highway, through the Santa Cruz Mountains to get to the school that we went to. It was like a half an hour commute, and we did it there and back every day. And the whole time, there and back, we would be listening to oldies and trying to sing and dancing in the car. And those commutes went by like that. And then we'd get home, and my mom would help me with homework, and you know, sometimes I would tell her that I didn't have any homework, and so she would just let it slide. This is another fun aside. I found out for the first time going through my mom's old pictures that she was just a horrible student. My mom ended up being like a super professional, successful person in her field. And she got like C's and D's in high school and in middle school. And I pulled out her report card and read it, and I was like, this is where I get this from for sure. As you guys know from me talking in the past, I never did my homework unless my mom sat there with me and did it. And she probably knew from her history that was what it would take to get me to do it. But I'm like my mom that way. Like my mom was not trying to impress people with her grades. My mom was just a boss. She didn't need anybody else's like, you're doing a good job, Carolyn, here's a raise, here's the promotion. She was like at the top. And so that's why is one of the things that inspired me to not be in the corporate world. Can you imagine me wearing a tie with my man bun? So I just went straight to, I'm just gonna be the boss, open up a martial arts school. That's another thing anyway. So it would be fun. And my mom made everything fun. After homework was done, we'd turn on music again and we would keep dancing. And it was like life was filled with dancing and singing for the majority of my childhood growing up. And that is just a thing that I miss from my mom. It's a thing that I'm so glad that I had, because I feel like it's rare. I feel like it's rare to have a life and a relationship with anybody, especially with your parent, that is so overrun with fun and dancing and laughing and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, the truth is that I'm very sad. I'm very sad that my mom is gone. And as I mentioned in earlier classes this week, I implore you to not be freaked out by me seeming to be in a good mood and by me being energetic when I teach classes, but that was my mom too. My mom's life was not all peaches and cream. My mom's life was not perfect. And she always had a strong, I'm not going to call it a front, because it was who she really was. My mom had like a strong, positive attitude, and she would not let herself be sucked into negativity. She would not let herself really deal with that stuff. In some cases, it was probably less healthy, but she showed me this is important to be positive and to be powerful and to be bold and energetic, because this is how we move people. This is how we move things. So I do have moments where I break down and cry. When I was writing my mom's eulogy, which is a lot of what you guys just heard, I cried 20 times every time I read through it. And I'm sure that will continue for a little bit, and I'm okay with it. Although, to be completely honest, I've cried more in the last week than I ever saw my mom cry in my entire life. My mom literally cried in front of me, I think, 3 times. And that's not an exaggeration. Kind of wish I had seen more crying, because it took me a while to realize that crying is normal and okay. But my mom did kind of always have this very strong, very positive, front-facing way of being. And I think that it is totally reasonable to be sad and to be able to set that aside for a time, and to be energetic and to be excited and to be happy, and then to go back and deal with it. So that's what I've been doing. Some of you guys have lost parents, and you've lost people very close to you, and you've reached out and told me about your experience and given me sympathy, and I appreciate that so much. There's a weird part of this where it's like every time I explain to somebody what happened, it's not like exactly like I'm reliving it, but it is that I am back in that place of being in the hospital with my mom and holding her hand. And it is not all bad. It was, as I mentioned before, it was a little bit traumatic to be there and to actually be present and watch somebody as their life slips away. But I am, at the end of the day, very glad that I got to be there with my mom, and glad that she got to have me and my brother and my dad there with her. And I don't think that my mom had regrets. My mom was not really the kind of person to at least dwell on regrets. Were the things that she would have changed? Sure. But she fought hard for 2 years. She went through chemo. She was about to start radiation, and she knew from the very beginning, as soon as they gave her her diagnosis, she knew that she was going to die, and she knew that it was going to be hard. She had a friend who had died earlier from breast cancer, but very recently she had a friend who had died from pancreatic cancer. And she knew from the stats and all that it was almost impossible. Yet she fought, and she fought in a way that she never really complained. I would call my mom and ask her, "How are you doing?" She'd be like, "Well, you know, I can't really feel my hands today. My legs hurt, but I'm moving." She'd say, "I'm exercising, I'm getting around, I'm eating food." For the longest time, she just couldn't eat, but she would just like, gotta force it down. And at the end, my mom got to go before old age and before even cancer took her dignity. My mom taught me, I don't think that she necessarily did this consciously, but this is one of the biggest lessons from her death, is the ability to let go. And my mom fought as long as, you know, there was a chance. And there was a chance. There was about a 10% chance that she could survive longer than she did. And she fought. And at a certain point, it became impossible to go on. And she went very quickly. She went from a place of, I've got energy, I'm pushing, I'm going, I'm doing everything that I can, to that's it. And this is a lesson that I've always struggled with for myself, and in my attempt to explain it to students and people who ask about it, whether it's about the death of a loved one or something else. But usually I talk about it with the idea of like goals, because we have a goal and we have a direction that we want to go in, and we go, and we should pour everything that we can into that. We should fight as hard as we possibly can, like we are fighting for our lives. And at some point in many of these goals that we have, we will reach a point where we realize that the goal that we had in mind, either in its entirety or in some form, in some way, shape, or form, is impossible. And it would not only be foolish to continue, it would be counterproductive. And so when we notice that, we don't try to stick up for lost time and keep pouring energy into this thing that is literally impossible. We turn and go in a different direction. And that is distinct from giving up. That is recognizing when going in this direction actually makes no more sense. The analogy that I always use is you're driving on the 405 and you're trying to get to San Diego, and at some point you realize that you're driving north. No matter how far you keep driving north on the 405, you will never reach San Diego. You will reach the ocean above Canada, but you will not reach San Diego. As soon as you recognize that, you exit, you get back on and start heading south. So it's not the perfect analogy to be speaking about death with, but it's what I've got. So the idea of being able to fight with everything that you have and then be able to let go because you're not attached is very difficult. That is a really challenging lesson for us as martial artists. We call it striving without striving. We call it effortless effort. And if we can love the process, or we can love the fight, we can love the battle, without having to get the outcome that we are aiming at. That is life. That's death, right? There comes a point for all of us where we must let go. And there came a point for my mom to let go, and that was the point for me and my family to let go of her. And while it's sad that she's gone, it's beautiful that she was here, and it's beautiful that she fought the way that she did. So that is the way that I remember my mom. I remember her full of life. I remember her dancing and singing. I remember her being stubborn and immovable in some ways, sometimes. And that makes me happy to remember her that way. I said this at the end of her service. After her run-in with the church, my mom started to think about things from a religious and spiritual perspective, and I'm not sure that she believed in heaven at the end of her life. But my choice here is a slippery one, because this is not meant to be attachment, and it probably is sometimes. But I'm going to keep my mom with me. And when I remember her the way that she was, when I remember her with that energy and that grace that she had, in my mind, it's like my mom is in heaven, even if it's just in here. And when I remember her that way, it's like I get to be in heaven with my mom. And we talked for years about the places that my mom still wanted to travel. As a family, we were all about it. We're like, whatever we can do, wherever we can go, let's do it. We got to go to a few of them, but not every place. And I've decided that I'm going to go all of those places that my mom wanted to go, and I'm going to bring her with me. And I'm not literally going to bring her with me. We're cremating her, and we're going to spread her ashes, but I'm going to bring her with me in my memory, in my mind, in my spirit, and with everything that I do in my life, because that is what she wanted, and that is who she was. It's who she still is for me. So I know that didn't have a lot to do with meditation, but there were some snippets in there that I hope were helpful for you guys. Take whatever lessons you can from my mom. Take whatever lessons you can from the people in your life, and let's treat those memories with grace, and let's keep being the kinds of people that they would want us to be. So when you meditate hard, put everything you've got into it. And when you do anything else in life, bring that same kind of spirit with you. Sit comfortably.